Have you ever met someone who seems almost too perfect? They never raise their voice. They're calm under pressure, always polite, always ready to help, almost saint-like in how they carry themselves. And yet, something about them makes you uneasy. You can't put your finger on it, but deep down, you sense there's something they're not showing. Most people would tell you to watch out for the hot-headed, the aggressive, the openly manipulative. But what if the real danger hides in people who appear flawless? What if the most unsettling thing is not loud hostility, but a silence that conceals something far more powerful? Carl Jung, one of the most profound thinkers of modern psychology, warned about a kind of danger that doesn't look dangerous at all. It's not the liar you catch in the act, nor the narcissist who demands attention. No, the ones Jung wanted us to notice are those who hide in plain sight, often admired, sometimes even celebrated for their composure and goodness. But beneath that carefully polished surface is a truth they don't want to face, and you might not see it until it's already affecting you. Jung believed that every one of us was a kind of psychological mask, which he called the persona. It's the face we show to the world, the version of ourselves that makes us likable, respectable, and socially acceptable. Your persona is what lets you walk into a room and be seen as competent, polite, kind. It's not a bad thing. It's necessary for living among other people. But Jung's warning was that behind this mask lies another realm entirely, the unconscious. And inside that unconscious is something he called the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It's not some monstrous part of you waiting to destroy your life. It is simply the honest part of yourself, the side that holds your unfiltered emotions, your unspoken desires, your suppressed instincts. It contains the pieces of you that you learned, often as a child, were unacceptable. Maybe you were rewarded for being polite and punished for being bold. Maybe you were praised for being humble and criticized for showing pride. So you learned to hide anger, ambition, jealousy, even certain kinds of curiosity. You buried them deep enough that you might have convinced yourself they were gone. But they're not gone. They've only been pushed out of sight, waiting in the dark. And here's the part most people miss. The shadow doesn't just contain the things we're ashamed of. It also holds our untapped strength, our creative fire, our ability to stand up for ourselves, our raw, unpolished truth. When we refuse to acknowledge these parts, they don't simply disappear, they twist. They find ways to surface, often in forms we don't recognize. This is why Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. When you refuse to see your own capacity for anger, you might think you've transcended it, but in reality, it's still there, shaping your choices from the shadows. When you believe you're above selfishness, you might not realize you're helping others just to feel in control. When you insist you're only setting healthy boundaries, you might actually be punishing someone in subtle ways. The most dangerous part is that people like this aren't lying to others first, they're lying to themselves. They truly believe their actions are pure, but their motives are flawless. And because they've built their identity on being good, they can't risk admitting they have any darkness at all. This isn't because they're villains. It's because they've become disconnected from themselves. But the more they deny that disconnection, the more others get caught in the fallout. Some of the most damaging people you'll ever meet won't look dangerous. They'll look enlightened, compassionate, maybe even inspiring. But they are at war with themselves, a war they don't even realize they're fighting. And when that happens, the shadow doesn't just stay hidden. It starts leaking out in disguised forms. Sarcasm, passive-aggressive comments, relationships that look caring but are actually controlling. The more someone clings to their identity as a good person, the more the shadow grows in the dark. And the more they deny it, the more it chooses how to come out. That's the paradox Jung saw so clearly. Those who believe they have no shadow are the most controlled by it. Because if you refuse to look at your own darkness, it doesn't go away, it just starts living your life for you. This isn't about blaming people. It's about seeing clearly. Jung never said we should try to eliminate the shadow. In fact, he believed the opposite. The path to becoming whole is to face it, to admit with honesty and compassion, yes, I am capable of anger. Yes, I sometimes manipulate. Yes, I have desires I don't fully understand. This kind of honesty doesn't make you dangerous. It makes you trustworthy. Not because you're perfect, but because you know exactly what you're capable of. And that's the real warning. The most dangerous person is not the one who feels their darkness. It's the one who pretends they have none. Think about someone who refuses to admit they're wrong, not in a loud, stubborn, argumentative way, but with a calm, almost saintly conviction that their perspective is simply the truth. They listen politely, they nod, they use all the right words, but underneath, they've already decided there's nothing to learn. This is where the shadow becomes most dangerous, because the person carrying it doesn't see themselves as a threat at all. They see themselves as the moral compass in every room. When you interact with someone like this, you might feel subtly diminished. They never insult you outright, but you leave the conversation doubting yourself. They may correct you in ways that feel like guidance, yet somehow you end up feeling small. They frame control as care, manipulation as help, and judgment as wisdom. They've learned to wrap the sharp edges of their ego in layers of politeness and charm. And because they truly believe in their own goodness, they never pause to consider how their behavior impacts others. This is the silent kind of harm Jung was pointing to, the harm done by people who live entirely in the persona, who have banished the shadow so deeply that they've become blind to it. They don't just hide their flaws from the world, they've hidden them from themselves. And the human mind has a strange way of dealing with what it refuses to own. It projects it onto others. Projection is the shadow's favorite game. If you've buried your own jealousy, you'll start seeing jealousy everywhere, in your friends, in your coworkers, even in your partner. If you've hidden your anger, you'll convince yourself other people are too aggressive or too emotional. If you've denied your own desire for control, you'll call others manipulative while steering every situation to your own advantage. The shadow turns the outside world into a mirror, reflecting back the parts of yourself you don't want to face. Now imagine what happens when two people who have disowned their shadows meet. On the surface, it might look like harmony. They're both polite, composed, careful with their words. But underneath, there's a quiet, constant exchange of unspoken judgments, subtle one-upmanship, and emotional undercurrents neither of them can name. This is why Jung considered shadow work not just a personal journey, but a relational necessity. Until you face your own hidden motives, every relationship you have will be haunted by them. Here's the irony. The more someone tries to be only good, the more distorted their goodness becomes. Love turns into control. Honesty turns into cruelty disguised as truth. Kindness becomes a currency to buy loyalty or admiration. And because these behaviors were the mask of virtue, they're harder to confront. You can't call out what doesn't look like harm, especially when a person causing it would be genuinely shocked to think they'd done anything wrong. This is where the danger lies. An openly aggressive person is easy to spot and defend against. But someone who hides behind their goodness can slip past every defense you have, precisely because you don't think you need to protect yourself from them. And by the time you realize something is off, the web is already woven. Your self-esteem chipped away, your boundaries subtly shifted, your trust recalibrated in ways that serve them more than you. Jung understood that the shadow doesn't vanish just because we ignore it. In fact, the more we repress it, the more control it gains. Think of it like a spring you push down with all your strength. You might keep it compressed for a while, but eventually it finds a way to spring back, and when it does, it doesn't come out gently. It bursts through in moments you can't predict. A sudden outburst, a cutting remark, an act of sabotage even you don't fully understand. And here's what makes it even more dangerous. The people who deny their shadow the most are often the ones in positions of influence. Teachers, leaders, mentors, even spiritual guides. Because they've built their entire identity on being trustworthy and virtuous. Admitting to any inner darkness feels impossible. So instead, they double down on the image, pouring more energy into the persona while the shadow grows unchecked beneath it. They become split, half of them shining in the light, half of them lurking in the dark, and the gap between the two only widens. If you've ever felt deeply unsettled by someone you should admire, this is probably why. Your instincts pick up on the split, even if you can't articulate it. You sense that what you're seeing isn't the whole truth. And that's not paranoia. It's your own unconscious recognizing that there's this out of balance. The most powerful thing Jung taught about this dynamic is that it's not limited to other people. The shadow lives in all of us. You can look at someone else and think they're in denial about their darker side. But the moment you do, you have to ask yourself, what part of my own shadow am I ignoring right now? What am I projecting onto them that I don't want to admit about myself? That's the uncomfortable truth about shadow work. The more you see it in others, the more it invites you to see it in yourself. And most people avoid this invitation because it feels threatening. But in reality, this is the beginning of freedom. By the time you start to notice these patterns, in others and in yourself, you're already stepping into deeper awareness. The danger isn't in seeing the shadow. The danger is in refusing to look. Here's the paradox that almost no one talks about. The moment you stop pretending you're only light, you actually become less dangerous. It sounds backward, doesn't it? You think admitting your flaws would make you more harmful, more untrustworthy. But in truth, the opposite happens, because the moment you acknowledge your shadow, it stops having to sneak out through the cracks. Think about it. If you can say to yourself, yes, I get jealous sometimes. Yes, I can be controlling. Yes, I have a temper. You've taken away the shadow's greatest weapon, its invisibility. You can't be manipulated by what you can see clearly. That doesn't mean those impulses vanish overnight, but it does mean you have the choice to act differently. The darkness you've acknowledged is no longer driving your behavior from the back seat. Jung didn't see the shadow as a curse. He saw it as a source of untapped life force, a reservoir of raw honesty, creative energy, and emotional truth. The anger you suppress might contain your ability to set boundaries. The jealousy you deny might hold the key to understanding what you truly want. The selfishness you're ashamed of might actually be your instinct to protect your time and energy. When you integrate these parts, you stop waging war against yourself and start becoming whole. But this takes courage, the kind of courage that doesn't look heroic from the outside. No medals, no applause, just the quiet bravery of sitting alone and saying, I am not perfect and that's okay. I have a shadow, and it's mine to carry. And this isn't a one-time declaration. It's a practice. Every time you catch yourself judging someone harshly, you ask, what in me is this reminding me of? Every time you feel an emotional spike, anger, envy, defensiveness, you turn inward first, not outward. And slowly something shifts. The people around you start to feel safer. Not because you become some flawless beacon of light, but because they can sense your honesty. They can feel that you're not playing a role, not hiding behind a mask. Trust grows not from perfection, but from transparency. It's worth remembering that integrating your shadow doesn't mean acting out every dark impulse. It means owning that the impulse exists and finding a conscious way to work with it. If you're angry, it doesn't mean you explode. It means you admit you're angry and choose a way to express it that doesn't destroy. If you're jealous, it doesn't mean you lash out. It means you acknowledge the desire underneath and let it teach you something about yourself. People often fear that looking at their shadow will make them more negative. But in reality, the opposite is true. It's denial that warps goodness into harm. It's repression that twists love into control, boundaries into punishment, kindness into resentment. When you stop denying what you are, you stop accidentally turning it against the people you care about. And maybe the most surprising gift of shadow work is this. You start seeing other people differently too. Instead of immediately labeling someone as toxic or evil, you can recognize they're acting from an unintegrated shadow. That doesn't mean you excuse harmful behavior. You still protect yourselves, but you understand where it comes from. You stop taking it as a personal attack and start seeing it as a human struggle. This is what Jung meant when he said, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. The more you integrate, the harder it becomes to be manipulated, because you know the tricks the shadow plays. You've seen them in yourselves. And this is why the most dangerous person is not the one who knows their darkness. It's the one who insists they have none. Because denial doesn't erase the shadow. It just lets it run wild without their knowledge. Those are the people who cause the deepest harm while still believing they're the hero of the story. But if you're hearing this, if you felt the unease of recognizing your own shadow in someone else or in yourself, you're already ahead of the danger. You're already standing at the threshold of something Jung believed to be the highest form of integrity, the willingness to carry both your light and your darkness with open eyes. So the next time you feel that subtle unease around someone too perfect, pay attention, not to judge them, but to remind yourselves of what perfection often hides. And when you notice yourself projecting, seeing faults everywhere, but in the mirror, pause. Ask the harder question, what part of me am I looking at without realizing it? This is where real strength begins, not in chasing an image of purity, but in accepting the complexity of being human, not in denying the shadow, but in letting it walk beside you without letting it take the lead. If this resonates with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Because shadow work is not just personal, it's contagious in the best way. The more you own your darkness, the more you give others permission to own theirs. And in a world obsessed with appearances, that kind of honesty is revolutionary. Remember this: the deeper you look into others, the more you're invited into the depths of your own soul. And that's not something to fear. That's something to embrace, because wholeness is not about erasing the darkness. It's about seeing it, naming it, and choosing how it shapes you. That is the beginning of wisdom. That is the beginning of real integrity.